Hello and welcome to the IT Shed. In this video we're going to look at Seasons of Love, and this comes from CS50P. So the basic premise of this program is we enter a date of birth in this format. Now this date of birth is prompted from the user. So it does the calculations and then it's going to output how long you have lived, and it's going to write it. For instance, this demo was done on the 1st of January 2000. So on that date, if you inputted 31st to 12th 1999, you get back that you lived for 1,440 minutes. So our output is going to be in text format. So to convert our numbers to text, we're going to use the inflect module. You'll see it here in hints. The dates and how we manipulate dates, we're going to use the datetime module. There's a few little things we've got to do. We've got to take out the AND. So this output will initially give us an AND. So there'll be an AND here, so we're going to have to get rid of that. And that we will do again in the inflect module. I'll show you how to do it once we get there. So as usual, we're going to make our folder. We're going to create our file. We're also going to have to create another file once that's done. It's a test file, so we're going to have to test it. It wants us to, the assignment asks for us to test it. So I'm going to begin by just copying this into seasons.py that I've already created, a blank file, and we work from here. So from here we're going to import our modules. Now the boilerplate code has already imported date for us, so from datetime import date. So we're going to have to import sys. We're using sys here because in our program, if the user inputs an invalid date, then it's going to throw a value error. It's going to print out invalid date. So sys will do that for us. Now we're also going to look at inflect. So if we go into our hints here, we see we need to pip install inflect. And if you look at the documentation, we're going to pip install inflect, and then we're going to import inflect. So I just put import in here. And down here I'm going to pip install inflect. So if we look at the documentation again for inflect, we see that to use it we need to assign it to a variable. So we assign inflect.engine to a variable, in this case p. So we can just copy that into our program. And that allows us to use the functionality of inflect. Okay, now that we have this much done, how are we going to proceed from here? Well, I have a to-do list. So pset8 and module 8 is all about classes. So I'm going to create a class. So within that class, I have a couple of tasks I need to do. So I have to get today's date. I have to get the DOB from the user. So if I input the user's date of birth, I'm going to have to do a calculations on two of them. So calculate the days since birth by subtracting these. And that will give us the days. So I'm going to convert those days to minutes. And then I'm going to convert those minutes to words. So instead of writing 2,500 minutes, I'll instead write 2,500. And I'll do it as text rather than the numbers here. Okay, let's start by creating a class. So I'm going to say class. I'm going to call my class calculate date. Okay, so within the class, I'm going to initiate it. So I'm going to use the self keyword. And for the moment, it's going to pass here. Now, I'm also going to create a function to get the DOB. So I'm going to define get DOB. And again, I'm going to pass. So I'm going to use this function to get the DOB from the user. And I'm going to do another function to convert to words. So this will be used later on to convert the numbers to words. Okay, now I'm going to get the DOB from the user so we can start our program properly. So I'm going to create a variable called DOB, and I'm going to get the input by saying input, and I'm going to give the user a prompt. So I'm going to use the prompt, enter your DOB, and I'm going to ask them to do it in this format. So that will take the input from the user and save it into this variable. Now I'm going to do some error checking in this later on, but at the moment I'm going to back up here to our initiate function. So DOB is going to be the actual only input we're going to get from a user. So the only interaction we're going to have with the user. So I'm going to say self up here and DOB. So down here I'm going to go self.dob. I'm going to assign that to DOB. So DOB here is going to be assigned to self.dob. Okay, so far we've created the class and we've got our DOB from the user. So next thing we need to look at is getting today's date. So I believe we've used this in a past assignment. It's the date time module, and it's in the hints as well. So if you look at here and you search, you get date.today. This will give you a method that returns today's date. So what I'm going to do back here now is I'm going to call that method, so date.today, and I'm going to assign that to a variable. I'm going to call the variable self. I'm going to say today's date. You can call it anything you like. Now, I hear you asking, why is DOB up here but today's date is not up here? That's because today's date is gotten without any interaction from the user. So DOB is going to be getting interaction from the user down here, but today's date is independent of it. It's getting from the module up here, import date time. So it doesn't need to be initiated up here. So that's us finished with this function here. That is completed. So now we got to get ready to do our calculations later on. And in order to do the calculations with date time, we need to make sure that this is in an ISO format. So again, if we go into our date time documentation and we search from ISO format, we'll get date.iso format and what we're converting. So in here I'm going to go date dot from ISO format, and I'm going to put DOB because that is what we're converting. And once that's converted to ISO format, we're going to again save it back into DOB. So we're basically taking the DOB from the user, we're converting it to an ISO format, and we're saving it back in again. And this will enable us to do our calculations later on. So once that's complete, we're going to return it. So we're returning calculate date DOB. So we're returning calculate date DOB, and that will be used in our other functions. Here is a good place to do our checks to make sure that it's the right format, and if not, it'll return a value error. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a try statement. I'm going to indent these two. So I'm going to try getting our DOB in the correct format. If it is in the correct format, it's going to return it. If it's not, we're going to use the accept statement. So I'm going to say accept value error. And if we do have a value error, I'm going to sys.exit. Now, to make it helpful for the user, I'm going to give them an error code. So invalidate format, enter in this format. Now, as discussed in the course videos, this function here doesn't actually interact with the user at all. So I'm going to make it a static method. So at static method. So a static method is part of the class rather than the instance. So it has no user interaction. It doesn't use self. So it's not used, it's not going to be used called by the user. So that's why it's made a static method. It's mentioned, David explains it very well in the video. So there's no point in me trying to go over old ground here. Okay, now that we have our date and our today's date, the next thing we do is calculate how many days we've lived. So what I'm going to do here is create a variable called days lived. And to do the calculations, I'm going to subtract the date of birth from today's date. So within brackets, I'm just going to copy self.today's date. And I'm going to subtract self.dob. And I'm going to use a method contained within the datetime module called .days, just to convert it to days. So now if I was to print that, it'll print out that we've lived for X amount of days. So now that we have our days lived, let's convert them to minutes. So minutes lived is going to be assigned to days lived multiplied by 24 hours a day, multiplied by 60 minutes. Okay, let's just test this. So I'm going to return minutes lived. Now down in our main, I'm going to create an instance of the class. So I'm just going to say my DOB. That's initiate an instance of the class. I'm going to say calculate date, which is the name of our class, and I'm going to call our method getDOB. So dot getDOB. So now I'm going to create another variable. I'm just going to call it result, and I'm going to use result to get this function here, to call this function convert to words. So I'm going to say result assigned to my DOB, which is instance of class, dot convert to words. So now I'm going to print result. So down here I am going to call our program Python seasons.py, and it's looking for DOB. So I'm going to say 2001-01-01, and this is our result here. We have this amount of minutes. So this is the minutes in words. So far it's working. It's giving us our minutes. Now if I was to call days lived, it would give us our days. So the second last thing we need to do is we need to actually get, we have to get about converting this number here into words. So for that, I'm going to go into Inflect again, the Inflect documentation, and if you actually search for words, you get a method called number to words. So back here, I am going to call that method, but I'm going to do it, because it's involved in the Inflect module, I'm going to use the Inflect engine, which here is assigned to P. So down here I'm going to go P dot number to words. So what am I looking to change from number to words? I'm going to change minutes lived. So copy that, paste it in here. So minutes lived is being converted using this method and this engine to words. So I'm going to say it's a new variable called minutes, to the main in words. So now if I return, I'm going to return min in words. So I'm going to run the program again and get our date of birth prompt. Let's go 2001-01-02. So 12,565,440. Okay, so it's working. Now we need to get rid of that AND, because if we go back here we see this is the output and there's no AND. So to do this we go back into our reflect module and it's under AND word. So this is our P engine, our reflect engine, and our number to words method. This is the string we passed in and this is what we want here. So AND words. I'll copy that, go back to our program. So I type it in here, use a comma and paste it. So what we're doing is we're converting our string and we're removing the AND words. So AND words is going to be blank. And one more thing we need to notice is here that's capitalized. The first letter of the sentence is capitalized. So the last thing we're going to do here is we're going to capitalize it. So I'm going to say min words is assigned to minutes and words dot capitalize. So I think that is us just about done. So I'm going to test it one more time. I'm going to clear. And I'm going to run our program again. I'm going to say 1980. I'm going to say 0506. So 23,431,680. So this is our program just about done before we move on to testing it. But there's one thing missing, there's minutes. So it's supposed to be minutes here. So if you go in here, you see minutes, where we don't have it here. So to achieve that, we do an F string. It's just our print statement. So I go F, and then I'm going to go inverted commas, and I'm going to put result into curly brackets, and then I'm going to say minutes. We're printing our resultant numbers in letters here, and then it'll be followed by the text minutes. So I'm going to clear this and run it one more time. So run our program. So I'm going to say 1980 0506 again. So there we have it. And we have the minutes and the AND is gone. Okay, I'm going to test it now using testseason.py. That's a new file I created. So I'm going to be importing calculate date. So I'm going to say from seasons, which is the name of our file, import calculate date. I'm going to also import date time. So from date time import date. Now I'm just going to do a simple test. I'm going to check that the dates initiate properly. So I'm going to define test initiate. So I'm just going to test that we actually get a valid DOB. So I'm going to say valid DOB, and I'm going to assign that to calculate date. So I'm going to calculate the date. I'm going to say 1972, and the month is 5, and the day I'm going to say 27. Now I'm going to assert that our variable here, valid DOB, which contains our date in the ISO format here. This is why it's written like this in the ISO format. So the 5 and the 27, so you don't have a preceding 0. So our valid DOB taking our variable DOB, which contains our date, and within that is the year. So within our DOB, so DOB, we have the year, the month, and the day. So that's our variable containing our date, and it's broken down into the year, the month, and the day. So I'm asserting that the year is equal to 1972. So I'm just going to copy And I'm going to assert that the month within our DOB variable is equal to 5, and that the day in this particular variable is equal to 27. So I'm going to pytest test seasons.py, and we have passed. It says here we have passed. So this has worked. Okay, so the very last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check 50. So I'm going back here and I'm going to copy check 50. Okay, seems like we have all greens, so we have passed check 50 and we can now submit this assignment. Thank you for joining me in this video, and hopefully I will see you in another one soon.